So this story takes place in Nicaragua, in the southwestern part of the country, at a volcano called Cerro Negro. So the geologists in the audience, I'm sure there are many, will know that Cerro Negro is technically called a polygenetic cinder cone, which means black ash and cinders pile up around a central crater over a series of eruptions. So it grows like an anthill, basically, up like this. The volcano itself is 720 meters tall, which is half, again, the height of the CN Tower. And the western slope of the volcano ends up being this sort of like very steep, very smooth incline. It's 35 degrees at the top, increasing to 41 degrees about halfway down. The prevailing winds blow east to west towards the Pacific coast, and so the sort of the smaller rocks and all of the ash from the eruptions blow to the western slope, and you get this very sort of smooth incline. So in 2002, a French cyclist called Eric Barone came to the volcano called Cerro Negro to break the land speed record. And he did it traveling 107 miles per hour on his first try. To put that in perspective, imagine standing at one end of an NFL football field and traveling to the other end in literally the blink of an eye. I've never been that fast in a car. There's actually an incredible YouTube video if you search for it on YouTube. It's fantastic to watch him go down. It's also kind of horrific because shortly after Barone passes the radar gun, the forks on his custom bike snap and he crashes, ending up 100 meters past his wrecked frame. He's hospitalized for 3 months in Nicaragua, which is no picnic, let me tell you. And while he's hospitalized, somebody else comes to the volcano and breaks his record. Yeah, which is shitty for Barone, but really good for my story. So why does all this matter? So in January of this year, I went to Cerro Negro to do essentially the same thing as Eric Barone, but instead of using a bike, I was going to use a retrofit toboggan. Hence the name of this story, which is volcano boarding. And Cerro Negro is the only place in the world where you can actually do this sport, I guess. It's actually quite accessible. It's $28. It's run out of a hostel in a nearby town called Leon. $28 buys you a seat in the back of a flatbed truck, which takes you out to the volcano, the use of a homemade board. And on the day I went, the upbeat guidance of a guy called Anthony, who is squat and agile and so athletic that he can actually hop out of a hatch in the cab of our truck, spin around like he's on parallel bars, and land in the back and talk to us about the adventure. The roads in Nicaragua are seriously unpaved, so our truck is kind of going like this, and he's standing there kind of like me, not moving at all. So agile as Anthony. It also turns out that he's from Carroll Gardens, Brooklyn, so maybe just sort of envision us kind of like hipster Tarzan. And that's sort of what Anthony looks like. So we're driving out to the volcano, and Anthony's in the back, and he tells us that CNN has in 2011 released this sort of like bucket list of the top 50 things to do before you die, and volcano boarding turns out to be number 2 on the list. Number 1 is flying a fighter jet. He also tells us that he's going to teach us how to go 50 miles per hour on the board. But if we don't want to go that fast, that's totally fine. Nobody will call us any names, but we personally will feel ashamed of ourselves if we don't go that fast, so maybe don't do that. And he also promises to tell us about all of the injuries previously sustained, but on the way home. So we get out to the volcano, and we hike up. You go out the sort of eastern side, which is a bit flatter and more accessible. It takes about half an hour to hike up to the top of this thing. You have to carry your board parallel to the ground, sort of like this. You can't carry it beside you like this, perpendicular, because the wind is so fierce that you'll probably blow over. It's a bit sort of uneven on the ground on the way up. The board itself is a piece of plywood. It's like a toboggan, so it's about this long. The bottom is covered in sheet metal. There's sort of a handle that you hold. It's easier without a drink, but it's a bit like water skiing, except you hold it this way, like a rope handle, and there's a lip at the front for your legs. And then underneath where you sit, so on the back of the board, there's a piece of formica, which is like kitchen countertop, if anybody knows what that is. And so the idea, I'll try and do it with the mic, but you sort of like, you lean back as far as you can and hoist your feet up and sort of balance the crook of your body so you're just riding formica, and that's how you get to go 50 miles an hour. Steering is pretty straightforward. You tap your left foot to go right, your right foot to go left, and the hokey pokey happens in the middle. And if you tap both feet, you go slow. It's like the brakes, but Anthony says you should just not use the brakes. So he gives us all these directions while we're standing at the top of the volcano. So remember, it's like 720 meters. The straight line distance down is about 1,000 meters, which turns out to be farther than most people's eyes can still focus. So like, try to imagine you're standing on the top of this volcano, half again the height of the CN Tower. You're looking out at this sort of like wash of volcanic ash from previous eruptions. And then there's this sort of like hazy green belt of jungle and farms. And then there's the Pacific Ocean in the back, which blends into the sky and you can't sort of discern where the difference is. There's this sort of like orange fuzzy splotch on the bottom, which is our truck that drove us out. And then there's this sort of like stringy guy waving his hands like this. And that's our driver. And the driver has like a speedometer, like a radar gun. And that's how he clocks you as you go down to see if you like go 50 miles an hour. So it's terrifying is basically what I'm saying. You don't have any like protective gear. You're wearing this sort of like one size fits all jumpsuit of cotton and those like plastic eye goggles that you get in grade 8 science class. And that's it. So everybody's, like nervous at the top. And Anthony, in a like total chivalry fail, turns around and makes all the women go first. Inexplicably. So there are like 20 of us, and I think there are definitely 4 girls. You go 2 at a time, and 16 dudes. And of course, all the dudes are standing around, just sort of like, tut, that's terrible form, Anthony. I personally inside am going like, I definitely don't want to go first. And like the wind at the top is ferocious. So we watch the women go down. And it actually kind of looks like you're on fire as you go down the slope, because you're in this like bright orange jumpsuit, and this trail of black volcanic ash just streams out behind you in the wake. And remember, the slope is 35 degrees at the top, 41 degrees at the bottom, so it's convex, so you actually disappear from view as you're going down and watching from the top. But so we watch the girls go 2 at a time, and then Anthony turns around and for the first time in the entire afternoon stops smiling, and he's like, okay, now that all the girls are gone, we can get serious. I don't want to see any of you guys being pansies. He didn't say pansies. They're videoing, I don't know what to say. No sitting up, no feet on the ground, let's put on a good show. So Anthony redeems himself, I suppose. So it's my turn, and so the way you sit on your board, and Anthony like holds his foot out on your board because you're inclined, and then you get set up, and then he steps away, and away you go. So the initial descent feels a bit like being in the front seat of a what's it called? Roller coaster. Being in the front seat of a roller coaster. So you're at the front, and you're over the initial descent, and you're waiting for the rest of the train to catch up with you, and then it does, and it throws its full weight behind you, and you all take off in this rattling downward rush. And the wind is ferocious, and you're trying to follow the track of previous borders, which turns out to be more like a trough, and there are serious dents in the trough. And you can't actually see anything while this is happening because all of this rock is flying up over the front of your board and smashing into your goggles. And you can't even open your mouth to scream, which is like the natural reaction when you're streaming down this like active volcano blindly, because if you open your mouth, all of the rocks that are also hitting your goggles would just go into your mouth and choke you. And it turns out to be fine because the actual noise of your board going down the hill is awful, like horrific. It's kind of like a car crash, but without the car. Because remember, the board is covered in sheet metal on the bottom, so it's just one giant scrape across the earth. Like the noise to end all noise. So I'm going down, and it's rattling hard enough to hurt my shoulders, but I'm getting the steering okay, and it's not bad. But I think I'm misaligned on the board, so I can't sort of lean back the right way to go quite fast. Like, it's pretty fast, but it's not quite as fast as Anthony said, and I don't want to feel shame later, so I want to go really quick. So I come up with this plan while I'm on the board, which is that I'm going to put both feet on the board, which forgoes not only steering but braking. So I do it, and zoom, I think, is the appropriate sound effect. In all seriousness, I think this is actually what it feels like to fly. It's not like the sort of weightlessness you might expect in space, where you can't sort of feel your body, but like your entire body weight, imagine this, your entire body weight, of which you are emphatically present, just sort of going so fast that it just, at some point, it feels like it's going to lift straight off the slope and go out towards the horizon, much like an airplane's wing, just like lifts straight off the tarmac. It's exhilarating. For me, unfortunately, short-lived exhilaration. because I really am not situated in the center of the board. So I'm listing to the right as I'm going down, but I can't steer anymore because my feet are on the board. And so I'm like turning to the right. So now I'm leaning back, but this is going to be really awkward with the mic, but I'm like leaning back and also to the right, like into the list to try and keep from doing it. And the guy with the radar gun is there, and I just like 3 more seconds and I'll be by and I'll beat the record and so on. And it's just listing and listing and listing, and then I just fail. And I fall on the slope. Which hurts a lot, but I learned some interesting things from falling, which I'll share with you now. The first is that it turns out that a person can barrel roll fast enough to not actually feel the rolling. It's really weird. So it's sort of like you're spinning around and you're conscious of spinning, but your body can't actually register the spinning. It has something to do with the liquid in your ears that registers your balance. It gets like stuck. You become this like human centrifuge spinning around a centrifuge. You laugh, but it's really uncomfortable at the time. The second thing is that if you are ever barrel rolling very fast and you want to stop, what you should not do is stick your leg out. Because your leg functions less as a brake and more like a pole vault. And you'll sort of careen through the air and spin around, and you'll crash again, your neck, face, and shoulder into the volcano. And the third thing is much more sort of banal and prosaic. It turns out that like volcanic ash and crater taste exactly like regular dirt. Anyway, so I go down, and I'm okay. I'm very, very sore, but I'm okay. And everybody else comes down, and there are lots of crashes, but no serious mishaps. And so we all pile into the truck for the drive back to Leon. And Anthony is telling us about the injuries previously sustained. So the week before we were there, some Norwegian girl came and flew over the front of her board and broke her collarbone, which apparently happens like monthly on this trip. There's a lot of broken wrists, a lot of broken arms, standard, and of course a lot of road rash. And the best road rash turns out to be when bald guys face plant and they tear up their heads and their pates. Oh yeah, this guy right here is frowning. Sorry, I've been waiting for that the entire story. You're like the only guy I can see in the spotlight. Perfect. Indeed. Well played. Anyway, so we're sitting in the truck. Anthony's telling us these stories. And does anybody else get this sort of like post-risk myopia? Yeah, no. So here's what I mean. So like I'm sitting there, and like the next day I won't be able to raise my arm above my shoulder because it's sore, and I'll have to like look left and right by turning my entire body because my neck is so sore. So I suffered a serious injury. I could have been way worse, but it still quite hurt. But I don't have any sort of like visible signs of pain. I have a little bit of road rash, but not so bad. But there's another guy in the truck, and he made it further down than I did, not nearly as fast. But the rocks get bigger as you go down further down the slope, right? And so he crashed way near the bottom, and so he like tore up his leg. So he's bleeding visibly in the truck. And I'm sitting there, and all I can think of is like, how come I didn't get an injury like that? You know, he's like a hero. Everybody's like, all the girls are like, the 4 women are like fawning over him, and like, you had to go first. And does anybody else feel? No. Anyway, I was a bit ashamed on the truck while this was happening, and to my like total shame, I actually thought of leaving that out of the story so that I would be more of the hero, and he's not even here, and he's still the hero. And but I didn't, because that wouldn't be good. But of course, the better solution is just to do something even more outrageous the next time, and then hopefully come back and tell you guys about it. So thank you so much.